Okay.
Okay, terrific. Yeah. So just noting that we do have Julian here. Let's continue with that quick round of self-introductions. Irene, why don't you take it away? Irene, why don't you
Sorry, I was
tell us a
having.
little bit about yourself? Thank you.
Hey everyone. Oh, there's some reverb. Let's try this one. Is that better? No. Do you want me to keep talking? That better?
It sounds fine on my
Alrighty.
end.
I'll just keep talking and yeah, we'll roll with it. Flex and flow, baby. Yeah. Okay, so I am Dr. Irene, and I am the founder of the Stress to Success S.H.I.F.T Institute, and I help organizations and individuals optimize success and amplify their success in all areas. And I love all the conversations that have been here so far because it's also minimizing the damage that the Great Resignation is doing. So I love helping organizations and individuals as well really enjoy the best success in all areas of their lives. So now, last night we were talking about something fun, and I know you guys have a little quiz here that you're supposed to be doing. So I'm going to tell you one fun thing about me so you can take that one off your list. I am Canadian. I come from farmer stock, and I had a pet miniature deer as a child. So there you go. There's a fun thing you could put down.
That's amazing.
Definitely. Okay. Let's switch back. I am Martinique Lewis. You can call me Marty. I'm a diversity and travel consultant. And most of the time people are like, Marty, what the heck is that? And I was like, don't worry. I made up the term myself 5 years ago. It's a lane I created for myself and I'm absolutely killing it. So what I do is I help travel brands and tourism boards understand how to connect with inclusive communities online and understand what our travel preferences are for people who look different or for people who are under that term of minority. But it does not stop at race. It does not stop at religion. It does not stop at age. It does not stop at disability. It's literally everything that we don't think of because we are not those people. So I help them understand what different travelers go through when they're traveling from destination to destination and understand how to set up a destination that is inclusive and welcoming for all people.
Is this one working? All right. Well, you all just heard from me. I'll tell you quickly about Growmotely. We are a remote work platform that helps companies anywhere in the world find people anywhere in the world and hire them and retain them. We have a big focus on culture fit and culture first hiring and consciousness in business.
Over to you, Julian.
Hello, I'm Julian Green. If it looks like I'm in the dark, it's because I'm in San Francisco. I would much rather be in Dubrovnik. I have had an interesting experience, like many of us. Started a company right before COVID and have been growing it as a remote first startup. And just before COVID, we decided to help with better meeting tools and video conferencing, which when COVID came along turned out to be an interesting choice. And so it's been a very thrilling ride. And we think a lot about how to make meetings better for everyone, and love to contribute to this discussion.
And if I can add just a little bit, I looked at everybody's bios, and Julian was led up Google Moonshots and was also a co-founder of House, which is a ubiquitous app for interior design, among other accomplishments. So anyway, a super impressive group of people, and I'm very honored to be in dialogue with you all today. I work for a global company from the incredible town village of Starigrad on island Hvar, which is just a little bit north of you guys in Dubrovnik. As mentioned, I had the pleasure of spending some time in Dubrovnik last year as a digital nomad, and then I learned that I was pregnant. So I promptly made my way back home. But it's a nice full circle to be joining you again this year. And to be talking about a topic that I don't think receives enough attention, which is the intersection of DEI and work from home, or more specifically, the digital nomad lifestyle. So just to get us started, I'd love to hear everyone sort of discuss their view on whether the opportunity to work from anywhere will advance inclusion and equity or push us back. And we can start with anyone, but Irene, if you can, feel free to take us away.
Oh, sorry, I'm having trouble hearing. So what was the question?
The
I think the question was what.
Can you guys hear me with this one?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So I think the question was around, does remote work progress diversity and inclusion or hold us back?
That is an awesome question. And I'm an eternal optimist, so I'm going to say that I truly believe that the potential is infinite, and it's what we choose to make with it. And so there are people who are fear-driven, and they will use that opportunity to try and drag us back. And everyone here and who's listening, anyone who's a digital nomad, wants to work remotely, you are internally motivated. That means that you are not motivated by fear, unlike most of the world. So you are the cream of the crop, and we have the opportunity to lead by example and show people what life truly can be like.
Yeah, I definitely think that it makes it more progressive. I think because when you're at home or when you can work remotely from anywhere, you can be yourself. Workplace culture does not necessarily allow you to be yourself. I can remember before the pandemic started, I was working at a company in San Francisco, and I hated going into work. Part of the reason was because someone was going to say something about my hair. Someone was going to want to touch my hair. So it was uncomfortable for me to have to figure out, okay, if I wear this today, is somebody going to say something stupid? If I want to change my hair from braids into an afro, is somebody going to say something stupid? At home, I can be myself. Additionally, for people who are differently abled, let's say somebody who's blind, let's say somebody who's deaf, their setup is already conducive to how they flow. Their work setup might not be that way. When you work at a different place and you look different or you have a different ability, your work has to then cater to you, and they don't always do that. So even think about places that might not have an elevator, places that might not have an elevator or anything that makes noises. So somebody who's blind knows, okay, the elevator's open now. So I think at home, definitely, or not at home, but remotely or where you choose to work, definitely will make sure that you're successful because you get to choose that place and your level of comfort.
I'll share my own personal experience. When I had an office in Melbourne, Australia, it was a pretty homogenous looking team. You know, it was a bunch of white people from my hometown, many of who knew each other and went to the same school and circles. And, you know, I was always someone who cared about diversity and inclusion, but it was harder to find it and achieve it. Also, it was only ever going to be diverse within one area. So there was only ever going to be as diverse as I could find in that area, even if I had a hard focus on it. What is so exciting when I think about where I am now, where we are now as a company, 22 people from 15 countries, all different skin colors, 60-some% women. We have lots and lots of different lifestyles, life circumstances, you know, you name it. The diversity is very high, and it contributes so much to our company and our culture and how we are. And I think it's so interesting what you mentioned, Marty, about company culture. And I think when we're office-based, the culture is very focused. People think culture is this material stuff, like what you're meant to wear and how you're meant to. I mean, I remember working in places where I wasn't allowed to wear something that showed my shoulders or something like these weird things that we create. And it was around what time we would go have lunch and where we would have lunch at and what was in the physical space. Culture now for us is how we show up for each other. You know, what is important to us, respect and freedom and transparency and all of these things that are much deeper than this surface level stuff that really doesn't get into, you know, who people allow for who people really are. So what excites me most about remote work is this access to a global talent pool and the ability to hire people from anywhere, from any different background, circumstance. We have partnerships with organizations that help refugees find remote work. This is so exciting for me because I don't know about the rest of you, but how many taxis and Ubers I've sat in my life with someone who happens to be a refugee or asylum seeker in that city who is actually an engineer or a doctor or something like that, but they are not able to work in their fullest potential because culturally in that area we see them as, you know, lower and just horrible things like that. So that excites me to say we're not going to lose that talent. We're not going to lose the women who want to stay at home with their children, or the fathers for that matter. We're not going to use the brilliance of people who might be physically less abled because they can have their setup at home that works best for them and contribute to the organization. So I agree. I'm very optimistic. I think there's, you know, huge advantages and opportunities moving forward.
Julian, what's your perspective on this?
I think it's a very exciting opportunity. We've been given the flip side of this terrible pandemic, as we've been given a great opportunity to reinvent work and reinvent how we can do this. So it's pretty extraordinary, and really no one knows what the future looks like. I hope that we keep some of the good things that have come out of it. You already mentioned, as a company, you know, as a startup, we're hiring people we would otherwise not hire. You know, in my first 4 startups, it was mainly a bunch of people in Silicon Valley, and the people that had made it there and you know, could live in an expensive place and do those jobs. And now we're hiring people in countries around the world, and people can be wherever they want. So I think that's very exciting. The other thing about fully remote, and we can talk about hybrid and remote, but fully remote, you no longer have this, there's a room where it happens problem, right? And so, you know, previously it was all about being in the room where it happens, and people had this fear of missing out and would go to meetings just to be there so they didn't miss what was going on. And it was a badge of, you know, of your importance that you were in certain meetings. And that's a terrible way to live your life, because you know, run around to meetings in which you're not having much fun just to be there. So I think it's super exciting that we can make meetings about, you know, getting stuff done and hearing people's opinions and you know, taking good decisions. The other interesting thing is, you know, home is a bigger part of work life now, right? So I mean, you know, here I am in my home at 2 a.m. in the morning in San Francisco, and you know, my kids are asleep and my dog's asleep and you know, my wife's asleep, and so we're actually getting an interesting look into people's lives, which you didn't get at work. And you know, this, I think, has generally been good, but you know, we've discovered that there are people who don't have good home work setups, and they don't have good internet connection, or they don't have the space with the, you know, with the other people in their house to be able to find a quiet place to do work. So it's not all positive, and you need to be flexible to how people can turn up. And I think hybrid, you know, we're sort of living this at the moment. We're on slightly, you know, I don't know how easy it is for you people to hear me, and you know, I can sort of see what's going on in the room, but you know, there's these 2 different ways of perceiving this meeting. Believe me, I would much rather be in Dubrovnik right now because I love Croatia. But you know, it's a different dynamic with hybrid, and we're going to have to work out how you make it a level playing field so that people can be wherever they want but still be in the meeting. And you know, we at Headroom, we have a bunch of theories about, you know, how video conferencing will change to make this better. But I think there's an amazing opportunity for inclusion. You know, the last thing I'll say is, meetings used to be things that you just sort of forget pretty quickly. And the information might be, you know, a few chicken scratches on a piece of paper, but basically you sort of had to be there to get the information. I think now that everything's digital by default, that people are much more interested in being able to use meeting information, search meeting information, share meeting information. And there's an interesting balance here between, you know, the privacy and confidentiality that you need to be able to have good conversations, and then how you use that information to be more efficient and move organizations forward. But that trust and transparency can be really helpful so that bad things, you know, don't happen in meetings and go unseen, and that decisions get committed to and stuck with, and so on. And I'll stop there.
That is terrific. Thank you all so much. For Marty, you've written an international destination guide for Black travelers called the ABC Greenbook, and there is a really powerful story behind that title. Could you talk about that and maybe what hospitality professionals might be missing today about how Black people experience travel?
Sure. So, all right. Got it. So for me, I am in the diversity and travel space, but then also, obviously, I'm Black. I also focus on Black travel. And one of the reasons that I did that is because I was understanding that Black travelers were spending an immense amount on travel and not being shown in any like travel advertisements, promotions. And that was really basically making me sick to my stomach. So we started to conduct research. And some of the research that we found was Black Americans alone spend 129.6 billion on travel annually. And for that number to be so high and the travel industry to ignore it, we're like, something has to be done. But even more so as a hyper traveler, when I say hyper traveler, as somebody who is traveling twice a month, who lives in their house less time than how much that they travel, who travels 260, around 365 days out of a year, I understood that when I travel to a place, for me to know where Black-owned businesses or Black communities are very, very important. Because as a Black female, I have to ask myself two things before I go any destination. Number one, is it safe for me, right? And number two, is it inviting for me? And what do I mean by that? Safety is a very, very serious issue when it comes to anybody who is Black. Sometimes there is overt racism, sometimes there's internal racism, but we face things at every single level. So when I mean every single level, from TSA, going through in the airport, from once we get on a plane, to when we get to immigration, to when we get in a taxi, to when we get to the hotel when we come. Those are all different steps that we have to think about. But even more so, as Black travelers, if I know where the Black community is in that location, when I get there, that's the first place I'm gonna go, because I need this sense of community. So I don't know if any of you guys saw last night, there's a young lady who came in who's here working with the symphony. As soon as I saw her, I gravitated to her because I was like, for one, I know you're not going to see another Black person for a while, and that's okay. But for two, I need you to feel safe here, and I want to know what your experience is here, because if you have an experience that's not good here, I'm going to let somebody know. But even more so, if your experience is good, I'm going to let the world know, because everybody wants to come to Croatia. When Croatia released the program for digital nomads, it went crazy in Black travel communities because people are like, we can go here and it's safe. They like us. They not looking at us crazy. Everybody's like, we love Croatia. So I started to create this book that tells you now everywhere you can go as a Black traveler, where there's a Black community and where there's Black-owned businesses. And it's called the ABC Travel Greenbook because in America, between 1930s and 1960s, there was a Negro motorist Greenbook. It was created by somebody named Victor Hugo Green, and it was put in place because during that time, Black Americans could not drive up and down what's known as Route 66 from the East Coast to the West Coast and stop without the possibility of getting arrested or murdered. So he put in all of these Black-owned accommodations, Black-owned service stations, and it literally saved people's lives. So I took that idea and I did it now for 6 out of 7 continents, because nobody lives in Antarctica but penguins and whales. And so you can't go there and necessarily find a Black community, but Black people are literally everywhere. And no, we may not be from here, but we go to places and we root ourselves. So this book did extremely well. People are like, you released it in a pandemic. And I was like, yes, I did. And they're like, why? I was like, because it was the perfect time to do it. People are at home wishing that they can be in different destinations. So now as they're preparing for when the world opens back up, they know the different places to go. So I do want to say to anybody who's here from any Croatia tourism or from the specific cities tourism, Croatia is a highly desirable place for Black expats as well as Black travelers, because how we are treated when we come here. But understand that does not happen in every single European countries. People don't necessarily realize that. So yeah, I just wish that the hospitality community understood that Black people are out here traveling. When one person says something is good, it normally influences purchasing decisions across the board when it goes to where people are going. I can tell you now, if you look at Black travel trends, we're going to El Salvador and Guatemala and Jordan in the drove loads, because it's what we see on social media. But even more so, we additionally search by hashtags. So before I came here, I searched Black in Croatia. When I met the young lady, Chelsea, from the symphony, I told her, I said, there's another Black girl here. She lives here with her Croatian husband. She's Nigerian, but make sure you hit her up before you leave. And if you're here for 6 months, she already let me know to tell you that you have a sister in her. So things like that are extremely important. And that's something, or the environment that the book creates.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Marty. Sarah, I wanted to turn to you to sort of focus on the gender question. So you run an organization that advocates for women. Where have you found that women fit into this lifestyle of digital nomadism? Are there systemic barriers to this lifestyle for women, and how can we overcome them?
Yeah, I think. Oh, we good? Slow down my answers. It's interesting you were mentioning about safety, and I think that's probably just for women in general, because from my own experience, I traveled solo as a nomad for several years before having a baby, which babies are less conducive to digital nomadism. I'm just going to say, you can totally do it, but like it doesn't seem that fun. So yeah, I think safety is really important. And the places that I always gravitated to were places that had very open communal space. So Ubud, Bali was one of the places I spent most of my time. And I think it is a really beautiful example of what digital nomad locations, cities who want to focus on it, towns, places that want to focus on that, look to places like that to see how they created it, because I've always felt very safe in Bali. I could stay in places and there was food and yoga and all sorts of things right next door, and everything was very open, and everything is designed for people to just be out and in community together all of the time. So working all day long in a cafe at a table with other people is very normal, very encouraged. Obviously, a lot of cafes in cities, they want to get you in and out and turn that table over so they can make more money on the next coffee, and that's not conducive to attracting digital nomads. But specifically to the gender question, I think safety generally for women is probably across the board. The main thing that we're looking at is it going to be safe for me to walk down the street, go do the things that I need to do, and I'm going to feel like I'm okay in my body, and no one's going to, I'm not going to get turned down a dark alleyway and get myself into a situation. And I think females who travel a lot and digital nomad lifestyle, like we are very confident and all of that, but it is that thing that sometimes you turn around and remember that you're 5'3" and in a foreign country from where you were born and nobody knows where you are. That often would happen to me. And so personal safety is the most important thing, I think. And just this open lifestyle where you can easily meet with and connect to other people. And I think it extends beyond just individual businesses, like an individual cafe creating that, but looking like as an ecosystem, how do we work together? The cafes, the co-working spaces, the co-living spaces, the restaurants, the parks, whatever it might be, like how do we all get together and create like a lot of flow between all of that? Because that is what really creates a hub and a hotspot for feeling safe and included and ease of access of having a great experience when we are somewhere.
That's great. Thank you. Changing gears just a little bit, I wanted to turn to Julian and talk a little bit about the technology that you're building with Headroom and some of the technologies that you've built in the past. So you're a pioneer in both image recognition and artificial intelligence, technologies which have been associated with algorithmic bias. Where did concerns around that arise with Headroom, and how did you address them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Headroom came out of wanting to tackle this, perennial problem of bad meetings, and I think the insight was that there's a lot of things we have to do in meetings which make it hard to have to work well with the other people. And so there's so much going on. You're trying to take notes. You're trying to take down the actions and the decisions at the same time as trying to actually communicate with someone else. So there's a lot going on, and we were thinking that the machine learning that was available could automate some of those tasks. So we can have real-time transcripts so that we don't have to type verbatim notes or minutes. We can have notes made automatically. So again, we don't have to do that. And then you can have, so in that meeting, you can also help people. If you want to put your hand up, you just put your hand up, right? So you don't have to sort of dive for a mouse and be overlooked and so on. One of the other interesting things, I guess, is the word share tool we have in real time, you're seeing how much each person is speaking, and so that really helps. And we can look at data, and I look at when I've spoken too much, as I hope I won't do here, and who has been overlooked and who hasn't had a chance to speak. And so some of those things I think are really important. And then the last part is to have a record of the meeting that you can play back, that you can search, that you can share. So my Headroom meetings, I can go back and look at anything from any meeting and go right to that moment and replay it and share, right? So that's sort of the solution that we've come up with, where you have a meeting, brain of everything. And so I think the ways that algorithmic bias could be a problem that you have to fight there are, for example, we do summaries of meetings. So you get highlights of meetings, and it's based upon how engaged people are. So I might tell you something, and I might be excited to tell you it, and you might be excited to hear it, and then that creates a moment of engagement, and that makes it much more likely that that will be in the summary, along with other things that you can do. If you take a note, it's likely to be in a summary and so on. But you could obviously have an AI that did that imperfectly, and it was biased against, one of the big questions we get is, what if people don't show much facial emotion? Does that mean that they get less represented in the summaries? And so you have to think then about, different baselines for different people, for different cultures. And so it's really, like anything, these amazing tools, which can save us a lot of time, they can be used for good, they can be used for bad. And it's really a question of how well you implement them. There's a lot, won't attempt to describe how you fight algorithmic bias and machine learning in general, but you have to be really focused on the right training data, on checking that you're not creating bad situations, and it's a constant effort, and I don't think it's a solved problem yet, but that's where we are on algorithmic bias for machine learning and meeting technology.
That's very helpful. And just to conclude with these, with my questions, and then we'll go over to questions from the audience. For Dr. Chop, for Irene, we've talked about some potentially stressful aspects of remote work and digital nomadism. In your view, what are some of the unique stresses of this work arrangement, and how can employers and colleagues work together to mitigate those pressures?
Thank you. Oh, no reverb. I love what everyone has said here, but needing to create a community wherever you go, right? Safe spaces. It's no longer, with the digital nomad remote working, it's no longer the responsibility, I think, of the heads of a company to create that. It's up to all of us. It's up to all of us to create that sense of safety, inclusion, community, because we are social creatures and we are all connected. And Mandy, when you said you felt lonely, right? This is what it now becomes our whole responsibility. As you said, reach out, connect, create meetups. And uncertainty is the biggest stressor. Dr. Hans Selye, father of stress, said that the greatest single stressor was uncertainty. And so we can create more certainty for our communities by reaching out and taking responsibility for each other, and not waiting for somebody. As again, Mandy said, don't stand in the back of the room and not talk to anybody, right? In other words, we tend to, especially when we're introverted, we tend to think of ourselves, right? And especially when we're under stress, when we're in a survival mode, in that uncertainty stage, we're more likely to think about, how is this going to hurt me? And I'll use farmer language if I'm able to. How is this going to screw me? In other words, how am I, and instead think about, how can I help somebody else? How can I make that one person over there that's standing by themselves feel better, right? So that is I believe we are now entering a global community. Universal, really, because in no time we're going to be on Mars, right? So it's, that's true digital nomads right there. So we need to really focus on that universal community and understand our part, that it's not, stop looking to other people to make things right. It's up to us. And it's also, you know, coming from my background as a doctor, there is that responsibility to our universal community. And it's also our responsibility to do the healing. Sarah, you mentioned that, right? It's important to do the inner work, to do the inner growth work, to do the inner healing. And I help people with their personal traumas, their intergenerational traumas, their epigenetic traumas, right? So, because when you talked about triggers, right, I've had clients say to me that they were triggered at being African American and say grew up in California, and they were in the South and drove past a cotton field and had a visceral reaction to seeing the cotton. That is an example of an epigenetic trauma raising its ugly head. So it's more important, I believe, to make yourself invincible and bulletproof by doing the inner work to clear the traumas at a conscious level, at an unconscious level, so that you are ready and open to receive the love of the universal community.
And that also stops the trauma perpetuating and spreading. You stop the chain.
That is amazing. And this panel has been so educational for me. And I just want to turn it over to the audience so that they can ask some of their questions. So is there someone in Dubrovnik who can facilitate that process? Because I can't see what's going on in the room. I think something's happening, but it's off mic. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you so much.
I don't think there are any questions from the floor. Were there online questions? No questions. Thanks, Carolyn.
Okay. Well, we have a few more minutes. Let me return to Sarah and ask you a little bit about, your business helps employers connect with workers all over the world, including digital nomads. And what are some of the challenges of inclusive hiring in that new dynamic? What are ways in which you've supported employers in prioritizing diversity in this new environment?
Sorry, could you just repeat the last part of the question?
I was just rephrasing. How have you supported employers in prioritizing diversity in this new environment?
Oh, good question. Okay. Well, I mean, I think Growmotely innately encourages diversity, because when a role is posted by one of the companies on our platform that's hiring, that goes out to our completely global audience of professionals from all different areas of the world, all different walks of life. And so the applicants that the company will receive will be very varied in nature, much more varied than what you would get hiring from a talent pool that's kind of very local and specific to your area. So I think the very nature of how we've built the platform gives access and opportunity to people from all different walks of life. We also through our brand and content and, things like me coming and speaking, really try to shine a light on this conversation, how important it is, how big of an opportunity remote work from a global perspective is for humanity right now. We truly can come to a place where we realize that we are all human beings walking around on planet Earth. I mean, countries are actually made up. The idea of race is made up, and we can transcend all of that right now by seeing that we are just people who might want to come together and work on something that we all think is important and exciting. And that is such a beautiful gift and beautiful opportunity right now. I really think, in the same way that travel, for anyone who travels, I don't think you would disagree with me that it's very grounding experience. It's very opening experience, opens your mind to these different ways of being, different stories. It allows us to question the things that we're being told through the narrative of wherever it is that we spend most of our time, where we live. Traveling always opens our mind to different ways of being, different ideas and questioning. And so the beauty of remote work is, like, I get to work every single day with 22 people directly, and then a whole bunch of other people from all over the place. And I can tell you, in particular, the last 2 years where I actually did not leave the United States, first time in my adult life that I spent more than probably 6 months in one location. I was there for 2.5 years. And I am so grateful to have been tethered to a really diverse group of people during that time, when we were being fed very strong location-centric narratives based on what was happening in the world. So I think there is just such a gift and such an opportunity, and we're doing everything we can to help break down these biases and these ideas of separation that are not true.
That's terrific. Marty, if I can turn to you, you have been helping people discover some undiscovered stories all over the world, and stories about Black communities in places as diverse as Amsterdam and Israel. Can you tell us about one of your favorite travel destinations? And then I'm going to follow up with the rest of the panel to get your thoughts on that as well.
Sure. And we also have a question, just to let you know. So after I answer this, there's a question as well. Yeah, Amsterdam. Well, London is my favorite place. That's where I live. But Amsterdam is like 2 or 3 for me. And part of the reason was because I didn't realize there was Black people there until I got there. And I know sometimes people are like, well, why either get the question, there's Black people there? I'm like, or why would you think there's not Black people there? Because there's Black people literally everywhere. But it's for the simple fact that, again, if we don't see this from tourism boards, if they don't share that there's these Black history tours that you can take in Amsterdam, if they don't share this is the 5 top Black restaurants in Amsterdam, you're not gonna know. But I can remember getting there, and the way that I search things, again, is by hashtag or by Facebook groups. So being able to find a Black women's group that was for expats in Amsterdam, I was delighted to find them. But then again, I found a Black history tour that was in Amsterdam that takes you around the red light district that everybody's going to go to anyways because it's world famous. But literally, as you're walking through the red light district, you literally just look up. And what I mean by look up is you look up on the buildings and there are these Black faces on the buildings, because back then the way that you showed that you were a slave owner or that you had money was by putting your slaves on your actual building. So these are things that people don't know. But then when you go and you learn about Dutch tourism or Dutch history, there's no Black narrative. And it's like, how's there no Black narrative? I see this man who looks like me right here throughout the red light district. So me being able to uncover those things, and not really uncovering them, just being able to expose it to a wider population, then drove tons of Black travelers to Amsterdam to take this tour. Then me sitting on the board at Condé Nast meant that I can now write about it in that, in that publication, so that more people learned about it. But there are stories like this around the world where there's all this Black history, but it's just never been told. So it's like we're rediscovering, because it's not covered, it's out there, but we're rediscovering and helping to be able to change the travel narrative. And those are things that you need to be able to drive tourism and raise those tourism dollars so that you can keep an economy going.
Carolyn, just to say, sorry to interrupt, there's a question from the floor. Please go ahead.
Let me test. There's no echo. Okay, it's fine. This is the question to Sarah, actually. And the story of Growmotely is very inspiring, which really stands out within the other job matching companies. So like my question is regarding the conscious approach of your company. I'm from Ukraine, and all of you know that our country is facing the war. And what happened is that male actually stayed in the country to fight, and over 6 million refugees left Ukraine. Most of them are women and children. So they also like usually are very skilled. They work remotely, and Ukraine is one of the largest remote working countries. You know, like we represent like number 4, number 3 in Fiverr or Upwork, or other companies, like other like platforms like this. So I am like a local influencer as well, with the audience of over 100,000 people, and over 60% of those are women who are my followers. So my question to you is like, is your company maybe able to create some kind of specific Ukrainian campaign to help women in Ukraine get the remote job? And if that's possible, because we see the example that as many companies around the world support in different matters this, in that case, we can talk more about this, and I will be able to like really provide a tremendous support from my side to spread the word within Ukraine, and we can make some really impactful like project in this case. It will be really cool, I think.
Yeah, 100% in. I do want to say, you know, 2 girls sitting right behind you, Theodora and Andrea, hosted refugees from Ukraine in their homes during the early stages of the war, and you know, we were supporting them to do that through Growmotely. So it's been an issue very close to our heart. We have an email address, ukrainejobs@growmotely.com, I believe it is. And have kind of worked with some other companies to make sure we're on lists where Ukrainian refugees, or I mean any Ukrainian really, knows that, you know, we are putting active efforts to help place them into remote work and remote positions. And this is a big focus of ours, something we're very passionate about doing. So yes, let's collab.
That's brilliant. Great to see those connections happening in real time. Just to round us up, because I think we only have 3 more minutes with this panel, I'd love to hear from you all what your favorite places to work remotely are and why.
I can go first, and then I'll shut up. I would Bali for sure. Ubud, I love it. It's really amazing. Canggu is also great. And then I love Guatemala as well. Antigua in particular. There's an amazing hotel called Good Hotel, which I stay. It's so great. But yeah, they're 2 of my favorites. Tel Aviv as well. I'll stop.
Yeah, I would say for me it's Colombia. I love Cartagena. I find myself there quite often. So that's where I would definitely work. But if I could just say something right quick, I just want people to know that if you are interested in being an ally in this nomadic space, the best way to do that is just when you see something, or when you see something that's out of place, or when you hear something that's out of place, that you stand up for it and that you speak out against it. So if somebody is doing something that is a microaggression, you correct them. Or if you understand that there is something that's not set up for somebody who does not look like you, that you say something about it, so that that brand or that company or that co-working space starts to think about how to change it. So think about if you're a transgender nomadic person and you come into a place, you have to show your ID. If you're now a woman but the ID is a man, and somebody, you know, makes a comment about it, how does that make that person feel? Or even down to the bathrooms, right? Are they non-binary? So just thinking about different ways that you can be an ally in this specific space. Always make sure you just see, if you see something, say something, like they say.
I love it. So I would be remiss, and I'm not just being political here. I love Split. And yay, Split. And I have to say that Tanya and her crew have made a very welcoming community there, with the Friday night dinners, with the it's so engaging. I will also say that Hanya in Crete also has a very, very, very active digital nomad community that is just, they're so helpful, so supportive. If you have any questions, you know, whether it was like, I remember it was like, I was afraid to get my hair cut. You want to talk uncertainty, right? It's like, as a girl, it's like, I went months and months and months without getting my hair cut. And so finally, I was like, I gotta do something. So I posted in the digital nomad group in Hanya. I was like, please, I'm about to cut my own bangs. You don't want to see that. Give me the name of the hairstylist, right? And it's like, yeah, it's like, we got you. We got you, right? So, and that is the beauty of this whole community. I don't believe it's the locations. It's the communities. It's the digital nomad communities. I looked at Slovenia. You know, my family is, part Slovenian. And the very first thing I did is I went on Facebook and searched for Digital Nomad Slovenia. 3 members in their Facebook group. That I found really sad, to be really, really sad. So guess what? I was like, okay, I'm not going there right now because I need the community. So to me, it's more about the people, and the high-speed internet.
And Julian, you can, please.
Perfect. Yeah, that's the old problem of knowing when to speak in video conferencing. International travel's been sort of thrown for a bit of a loop over the last couple of years, but I have kids, and so we tend to go for places where they can run around. So mountains and beaches. We had an amazing holiday in Ecuador recently, which was a surprise for me that the internet was so good. And I think what is interesting as we think about the world is places where you can go and feel safe, but places where you can get a nice ergonomic chair and good internet and be able to work with other people in a good space. And not everywhere has worked that out, and it's not always easy to work out where you can go in a city. When you go to a new city and you're like, okay, now I've got to work out how do I both do all the things to have fun and see the place, but then how do I set up a good work environment? I think that's a unsolved problem. There are some good tools and some good communities, and some of the nomad communities are super helpful on that. So we're still working that one out, but it's an interesting new way to see the world of how do I move around it and do the work I need to do.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your time with this panel and for having this conversation with me. And I'll let you all go to enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy this conference.
Thank you. Thank you.